So today I'm talking to two lovely young ladies from the Pacific Northwest, Miss Natalie Post and Kait Flynn. Among many things, these two young ladies have a podcast called Pot Moms, where they talk about a lot of the stigmas that go around cannabis and parenting. So in today's episode, we were talking about plant medicines and parenting and how a lot of these plant medicines can be used to help support us in the parenting journeys that we have, from psilocybin macro and microdosing to cannabis, hop A, even energetic medicines like combo. I love this conversation. I love open, beautiful, honest conversations with no judgment, from the stories that are shared, from the experiences that are talked about. Because I feel that's how we learn and how we grow in life, is by unabashedly sharing the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So I'm very excited to talk with these lovely ladies. Hope you get something out of the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Anamkara is a gorgeous meditation and healing center, offering daily in-person and virtual services to help bring you back to the center of who you truly are. They serve through a collective of practitioners, healers, and teachers, offering daily meditation classes, one-on-one healing sessions, workshops, personal ceremonies, and private events, plus corporate and team training, all with mindfulness at the core. The center itself is located in the heart of downtown Spokane. Every part of it was built, designed, and curated for you to drop into your calm place. They have a large community space for daily meditation classes and workshops, as well as 2 one-on-one healing rooms, a community kitchen to gather for tea, plus a well-stocked apothecary for you to gather all of your self-care and ritual needs. Hannah Talbot, the owner and founder of Anamkara, dreamed of opening this space for years. It is her ultimate manifestation, and she cannot wait to share it with those in the Spokane community, but also through the virtual ethers, wherever you may be. Pop in for a class today. You can follow them on Instagram to book and stay up to date. Check out the website, the full schedule, meet the practitioners, and view all the offerings. Visit them at anamkarahealing.center. Anamkara, may you be nourished and ignited. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. When we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. AdamRealHealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Natalie Post and Kait Flynn, the Pot Moms. All right, welcome back to the show. Today I'm talking with two lovely ladies that have a podcast that I found. The podcast is called Pot Moms, and it's amazing. And I just kind of stumbled across it, I think, through Instagram. And what really drew me to it is that I'm a parent that likes to consume plant medicines. And there's a lot of stigmas around that. There's a lot of questioning of, like, am I doing it right? Am I shortchanging my child by being stoned or whatever it is around this child? And, you know, deep down, I think that's a no. Like, I don't feel I'm shortchanging that, but at the same time, like, it's nice to get encouragement. It's like, hey, you're doing okay. So these two lovely ladies, Natalie Post and Kait Flynn, are here to join me to talk about this and to talk about some of the stigmas that surround plant medicines and parenting, the different types of plant medicines that we can use to support ourselves through parenting, and just kind of put aside a lot of this bullshit that, you know, we have to be this certain way to raise our kids. Me personally, I quit drinking alcohol about 4 years ago, and that's a personal choice. You know, I don't, no shade at anybody that drinks. You know, we all have our support in our ways. But I used to be drunk around my kid all the time. Yeah. And nobody said a word. They would pour me more drinks. And, hey, you want another shot? And I'm like, yeah, let me just hold my kid for a second, you know, so I don't spill tequila on her, you know?
Totally. Or your kid gets it for you from the 100%. I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so like that type of thing, as soon as your kids could walk, they could fetch you a beer.
Exactly. And I can't tell you how many times, like, I was from the South, get a beer from my dad and then just have the foam off the top and be like, ew, that's gross, you know? But then, you know, many years later, I'm like, oh, hops.
Right.
You know, so So just thanks for being here. Really excited to chat with you both.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, hell yeah. And this is one of the first 3-person podcasts I've done in a while. You know, I usually just get one guest on, chit chat. So it's nice to have the triangle of people in here.
I know, I love that.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off with just like giving you a chance to just talk about yourselves, what you do, because outside of being a podcast host and hosting Pop Moms, we all have lives. We do things, right? We're part of society.
Totally.
So let's say, Kate, want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Kait Flynn. I love hiking and yoga and running. I have 3 kids, and they are 5, 7, and 11. Boy, girl, boy. I've lived in Seattle for about 7 years. Before that, I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then I grew up in outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Love this.
Yeah.
And for work, you have
For
your
work,
own business.
Yeah. So I do, I help brands on Amazon, and I do contract work. I took a class in college, and it was about consumer behavior. And like the big message with college for me was like, oh, it'd be lovely if you could go be an artist, but unfortunately that's not going to pay the bills. So you're going to have to find some business alternative. Marketing and advertising was that. I learned a lot about consumer behavior, which is kind of obviously the science behind the decisions we make from a purchase perspective. And I don't know, maybe it's like some sort of like psychopathic trait that I carry deep down, but being able to influence people's shopping behavior, like made a bunch of light bulbs go off in my head. So I went that route, and so I've always worked in corporate retail since then.
Okay. There was I did a little stint with Red Hook about 6 years.
Oh,
and
very
that was
cool.
the very first kind of like retail restaurant that I worked at that had retail in there. And so I'm just fascinated by advertising and like how to get in the brain and all that shit. And I worked with a woman, her name was Paige, and she came from like one of those big ass stores like Bloomingdale's or something like that. And then we got her at Red Hook. I'm like, I don't know how the fuck that happened. But she was telling me that, and I read this book, but Sigmund Freud's cousin back in the 40s wrote the book on advertising. And so Sigmund Freud and his cousin, which I'm spacing on his name, same last name, but they both kind of came up in psychology together and were working through these ideas of the id, the ego, and all that shit together. Yeah. And then Sigmund Freud went the psychiatric route, and his cousin went the advertising route, and basically used all the information of how to get into the brains of humans and how to manipulate them, and wrote this book and be like, hey, guess what? I figured out how to sell bullshit products to people and make them think that they like it.
I was going to say, that is also an art, like manipulating people ultimately. As like, you're an artist in your own way doing that, right?
100%.
Yeah, but just even, I remember a case study of where you put groceries on a shelf and how that relates to where the person is looking at eye level. The higher it is, the higher the price point. The lower it is, the less of a chance that it's going to be even seen. So that science kind of propelled my career and where I've gone from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Thanks.
Hell yeah.
I love that.
Miss Natalie.
And I'm Natalie Post, and I am a headshots and branding photographer, a dating and lifestyle coach, and of course, a co-host of the Pop Moms podcast.
Boom.
And I have a 2-year-old son, and I met Kait very serendipitously, a few months back, and she had already been doing the podcast for a while. I was looking for a way to feel more, comfortable in my authenticity, and as an authentic person, I use cannabis, and it aids my parenting journey, I would say. And, one thing led to another. We practiced at the same yoga studio. We ran into each other the day after I had figured out this podcast even existed. And, 6 months later, here we are co-hosting it together. So
hell yeah.
It's been a very fun journey and like very therapeutic for me to, accept myself more for like the choices that I make, and also see it in a more clear lens, because I think the stigma impacts us too. We have this internalized shame from having smoked weed when it was illegal.
Right.
And even though it's been legal for 10 plus years, I still find myself sometimes like feeling those feelings of like, oh, is this bad? Well, what you mentioned, am I shortchanging my child? Which I wholeheartedly believe is a resounding no, you are not.
Right.
And in fact, there are so many moments that I feel like I'm able to be a much more present patient parent because of plant medicine. And I also have like kind of moved away from alcohol just because it gives me such bad anxiety, or as Kait loves to call it, hangxiety.
Oh, right. Yeah, totally.
And ever since you have told me about that, now it is so much more obvious to me. Like after I drink the next morning, I'm like, holy shit, I'm so anxious.
I broke that window pane for her.
Yeah, exactly right. So, but it's been a revelation because now I like realize that if I have anything else going on and I drink the day before, I'm going to approach it with an anxious mindset.
Yep.
And that is not good for me, So.
I love that anxiety. I used to call it emotional hangovers.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's like
You're afraid.
I'm so afraid. Like because I for the longest time I was a corporate guy. I ran restaurants for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And in the mentality in restaurants, I mean, take it or leave it, is you work your ass off and then you party your ass off, right?
Yeah,
In whatever way, whether it's
so
drugs,
fun.
alcohol, right? I had a great time in restaurants. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But maybe that's why you you mentioned that you aren't drinking either. Like same, like I checked that box. I checked it.
That.
I went back. I highlighted it, checked it. We crossed it off. Like I used to be able to drink with the best of them.
Totally.
But to this point, I have a sip and I feel like my body can now feel it's just like toxic.
I know it. I'm like, oh, I'm poisoning myself right now. Ooh, neurotoxin, baby.
Well, so that actually leads to a great theory that I want to start off with. So are y'all familiar with Terence McKenna?
Yeah.
Okay, so Terence McKenna is psychonaut back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, mainly 60s, 70s, passed away now. His brother is still continuing a lot of the research that he was doing back in the day. But Terence McKenna has written a bunch of books and a lot of talks, but he had this book, one of his more famous books called The Food of the Gods. And there's a theory in there that he talks about called the stoned ape theory. And the idea is that when we were hunters and gatherers, and when we still lived in villages of like 150 people, very small, close-knit communities, we were hunters and gatherers, and through that hunting and gathering, somebody found a mushroom and put that mushroom in their face. And they were like, oh, that seems fair. I was in cow shit, but that's fine. We'll clear it off and pop that in my mouth. And then all of a sudden, just think about the idea of being in the year 2, right?
Yeah.
The year 2. And then all of a sudden you pop a mushroom and you're in like New York City 2025. Right? How do you comprehend that? Like the lights, the sounds, the cars, all the shit, right? All the sensory and having a Neanderthalish brain to understand that, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea is that experience helped them to start to put together synapses and neurons in their brains that didn't normally talk. Mushrooms and psilocybin are known to help your sight. So being a hunter and gatherer, if you have better sight, you can see better. You can pick better shit. You can have more healthy food. You can see that fucking tiger that's far, far away, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta get eaten by that guy. And then through that, the genes kept, multiplying and reproducing. And then we got better eyesight, better brain use. We started cooking food. And now here we are as humans, right? So his theory is that mushrooms and plant medicines had a very big impact on the evolution of humans. And the other side of that was... if you look at the introduction of fermented medicines like alcohols. So when we were villages and we had these small groups of people living together, everybody kind of took care of everybody. Like everybody's kid was everybody's kid.
Yeah.
Say what you want about this, but there was a very polygamous type relationships. People were having sex with everybody, but that led to the community vibe of like, this is all of our children's.
Yeah.
Not just mine, not just yours. Everybody's going to raise that kid. Hey, there's a kid over there that's hungry. Go give that kid some food, right?
Yeah.
And so that was that feminine side that plant medicines bring, is that nurturing, that openness, that inclusive. And then that apple fell from the tree. And it started to rot. And somebody picked it up and ate it and got drunk and was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And then fermented medicine started to get popularized. And then we go to the patriarchy because fermented medicines, alcohol, amplify that masculine energy.
Yeah.
And then we go through the whole age of like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and the Dark Ages and all that stuff where there is a king that rules everybody, right? And now all the men, because everybody's drinking alcohol, feel that they should be kings too. So now we have this is my house mentality.
Yeah.
You follow my rules in my house, because we've lost the power to be part of a community. So now we have to kind of like coerce it inside our own space. And so now we have this aggressive patriarchy, male, like fucking do what I say mentality in the house, as well as in the civilization. And then now here we are. The patriarchy is still continued. We're fighting it tooth and nail to have gender equality, to have race equality, to have you be the gender that you want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that plant medicines support the journey of the human to find the human that they really want to be.
I completely
Well,
agree.
I always just feel like, comparatively, like alcohol has always felt very selfish to me, and that's totally fine. Like, but when I drink, like I want to have the time that I want to have, and kids just don't abide by that.
Right.
So that's where like me being maybe not the best parent is like, no, I'm trying to enjoy alcohol. And maybe it's when like the time in my life where when I was the most selfish, when we're in our 20s or whatever. And we have the ability to do that, and then you become a parent and you can't be selfish that way. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like females feel that differently than men, being the ones to carry the children. And then they're here and then they're entirely dependent on you.
Yeah.
So you have this giving of self that even if you want to be selfish, like you can't.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started having kids is when I stopped drinking, like to the extent that I was before,
Right.
because I couldn't have those selfish times and it just made me angry.
Yeah, and it like takes me out of myself too, I feel like now that I'm much more conscious about the ways in which I'm medicating in whatever capacity with any substances, it's so much more obvious to me that when I use plant medicine, it feels like a return to self in a way. Whereas when I, get inebriated with alcohol, I feel like I lose myself and I'm kind of like out of body, not present, and that is not the vibe that Mama Post wants to emanate, Just like not into it. So
100%.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like we'll have a drink. It's like I love a martini with some blue cheese olives. Don't twist my arm. But
Right.
also there's a time and a place, whereas like I feel like cannabis just works so much better with my lifestyle and with my art and my creativity.
Right.
And there are just like so many ways that it brings me balance.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that there have been times where I haven't used it and it's brought, imbalance. And so much of parenting 30s, this chapter is like trying to find the balance in maintaining that lifestyle and also like maintaining all of our responsibilities, which inherently in this culture, we have so many because we
Immensely.
don't live in that community vibe, which I am like screaming from my rooftop to everyone that like Danish co-housing communities, like there's a reason why the Danish are the happiest people. And it's because they try to still emulate that like community lifestyle. And it takes so much off your plate. And so we like have a group chat of our two neighbors' houses called the 189th Commune.
Yeah.
And we all kind of like, take care of each other's dogs and kids. And when they like had their kid early, we took their kid and their dog and their
Yes.
families in Iowa. And we're like working on building that even in our little, little sect of Seattle, because we know that it's how we're meant to live, in my mind anyways.
I agree. There's, like if there's the idea of why does everybody need a ladder? Right? Do I need a ladder every day of my life? No, I probably need a ladder maybe like 3 days a year.
Yeah.
So why can't we have a community ladder? Like I live in a cul-de-sac surrounded by like maybe 5-6 houses, pretty close knit. We know all our neighbors. So why can't we have like a ladder that maybe Bill has?
Yeah.
And then I say, hey, Bill, can I borrow your ladder? Yeah, no problem. And I got a drill. Bill needs my drill. He can borrow my drill. Santos
Yeah.
needs my drill. Borrow my drill. Right? So like in the idea of like that sharing is beautiful, but also it's now we're preserving the world, right? We don't have to mine all these different minerals and shit so that everybody has a ladder that they're going to use maybe 3 times a year.
Preach.
And then what the fuck, man? It's going to lay in my garage. I'm going to trip over it, a dozen times a day. All this bullshit, right?
I know, which brings us very conveniently back to this concept of consumerist habits and advertising and marketing, because we have all been sold this idea that like we will be happier, feel better if we have all this stuff, if we own these things, if we have our own exclusive ladder
Right.
that does fancy ladder things, whatever.
Yeah.
When ultimately we know the hedonic treadmill is real. No matter what you get, you adapt to it, and then your happiness is basically the same. So like, this capitalist idea we've been sold doesn't work.
Right.
And now we're just grinding it out in this system that is not serving most people.
Right.
And that sucks.
I think that, there's, with the recent legalizations in a lot of states of cannabis and decriminalization in a lot of states, and then also talking about like psilocybin coming up as a therapeutic medicine. The cannabis being the first plant medicine, technically, maybe a intoxicant to go popular and to be legalized. I think it lays an interesting groundwork for the future because, cannabis, yes, it's relaxant. It's, can help with creativity, help with a lot of medicinal things, but a lot of people see it as something similar to alcohol, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? It's a, intoxicant to some people's heads.
It's intent and use too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
I've used it just like I've used alcohol
I was
before.
gonna say we
I
talk
was gonna
about that
say
quite a bit.
during the pandemic, I had like a couple months where I was like, let's see how high I can get.
Yeah.
Like, what's my? I know I'm not gonna die from it.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
Let's
Yep.
see. Buckle up, because I was notoriously a lightweight,
Yeah.
and then
And COVID
Survival
toughened you up a little
times.
bit. Yeah.
thick skin in my lungs.
But with that, there's been that legalization. They see how much money they can make off of it, and now it's like, well, what other money can we make? Oh, psilocybin, that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this weird, cool social experiment to be witness to say, okay, cool, let's just chase the money, chase the dollars, chase the tax money, but keep expanding the consciousness and see what happens in the next 10 to 20 years as that consciousness expands. And then it trickles down into the way that we parent, right?
Yeah.
And the way that we raise our kids more consciously, and allowing those kids to now grow up a little more consciously, and then seeing how that continues to progress, right?
Totally.
I do feel like with cannabis and it becoming more mainstream, it kind of goes two different ways, right? Because if you don't have the education piece of it and the understanding, it is kind of just another Band-Aid, right? It's another coping mechanism. Totally. And so understanding, and this goes back to the we can't have nice things aspect of it, where we can't just now take cannabis for what it's worth. We have to then breed these super high THC
Wow. Yes.
strains, and we have these conversations. I speak with a lot of bud tenders, and we all kind of laugh because then people come in, they're like, just give me your highest THC strain,
Right?
And that
doesn't serve anyone.
It doesn't
really.
serve. It just doesn't really do the benefit for the plant that the plant could do for you. And so I'm a little jaded, I think, around that, because it's just, if we don't have the legalization at the federal level, if we don't have the education and the acceptance at that really high level, cannabis, and I mean, I have hope for it, because again, paving the way for mushroom therapy and other plant medicines, but I do worry that we're gonna just, the movie, what is it, Idiocracy?
Oh yeah.
I saw that when it came out, and I was like, oh my God, never. And then within from the pandemic, I'm like, holy shit, life imitate art. And I hope that we just don't continue to reduce certain things to be smaller than what they could be,
Yeah.
and wind up a bunch of bumbling logo wearing idiots.
In Crocs, baby. Which
Which is, everyone's wearing Crocs.
I know.
I went to a beach club the other day, and literally one of the parents is like, okay, can you explain to me the thing about the Crocs? And I'm like, it's 90s. It's...
Leon's obsessed with Crocs. My son, he loves his Crocs. So
My kids don't wear shoes. My son said this is not his goal anymore. His goal was to be the first NFL player to be sponsored and wearing Crocs.
Oh my gosh. Incredible. I love that.
Yeah.
That is one hell of a goal.
Yeah.
That's one hell of a goal.
Yeah, but I mean, I hear you, and I think I don't know what the word is, because it's not like a glorification of it, but this taking it to the extreme, which everybody loves to do, then perpetuates the stigma of it being this dangerous substance that is bad. And we know how healing it can be. We know how helpful it can be. I have told Kate many times I want to start a grow of some kind, whatever, to have my grandma's weed trademarked, where it's low THC, the plant in its authentic form. We will farm hemp. Our dreams of hemp farming is alive and well.
There you go. Hell yeah.
But just come back to the medicinal roots of it, because as a society, I mean, humans have been using substances, plant medicine, for millennia. We know this. And then we, now in its modern form, we're trying to take it to this place that I'm it's great where it is. It's chill where it is. Let's just enjoy it for what it is and stop trying to...
Even just how we use, even over-the-counter medicine as Band-Aids, right? You have a small pain, you go get Tylenol.
Right.
You've got, there's a thing to keep us from experiencing pain.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a very big common theme within society right now. And I think cannabis, we've talked about it a lot on our show, being an amplifier. If you're in pain and then you smoke a bunch, it might be a temporary reserve, but it's still going to be there. It's not going to fix it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think just between that and then the high THC and everything, I really wish that people would just learn a little bit more about it. And that's honestly been really big with our kids, right? So talking about cannabis with your kids is hard.
Yeah.
Because you damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I feel very strongly about this. I can have a conviction of how I think it shouldn't be done. It's still going to fuck up my kids, and I'm still going to have to pay for therapy if I go one route or the other.
Yeah.
But what's been really interesting is we grow it in our backyard, and having them see it from seed on our windowsill to plant to harvesting to seeing, mom and dad work together to build a makeshift cover for it because there's a wildfire coming. Things like that make it a lot more human, because we've talked about the dangers of smoking cigarettes, right? I mean, my son thought that every time you smoked a cigarette, it killed you, my 5-year-old. So every time he sees a cigarette, he'd be like, or like a butt, he'd be like, someone died there, Mom. Like literally like every day.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, just funny to see how any of those conversations end up manifesting itself with children, right? But with ours, they've been growing it. Like we don't smoke in front of them either. I will say that.
Right, yeah.
And so my daughter got up and had woken up after we put her to bed, because that's my husband and I smoke a joint after the kids go to bed every night. That's our routine. And she came out and she goes, "Why are you smoking?" And my husband's like, "Oh, it's cannabis." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
Like, so they cashed it because they know it's like the sunflowers we grow, or the raspberries we grow, or the chamomile that I grow, or the pumpkins that we grow. It's seen like that versus coming in with the stigma of maybe us growing up with dare, or being told this is gonna, make your brain a scrambled egg, whatever, however you grew up. They don't have that. So it's interesting because they still have the stigma of smoke specifically.
Yeah.
But then they won't have like, "Oh, just cannabis, you enjoy yourself. You have a good, I'll put myself back to bed because I see you're enjoying yourself."
Incredible. Well, and I think being part of the cultivation is so important. Like, as is the situation with every other system we have, where we are so separate now from the cultivation. Like, our food system is so jacked up because people are so separate. They don't even realize like what they're doing. I mean, we have a vegan neighbor, and so I think about it a lot more often because she is very, she is vegan for the cause, right? And so, when she goes into Costco, she's like, "Yeah, this is just like a bunch of flesh wrapped in plastic." Like, and now when I go into the store, that's also what I'm thinking. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just, we're so separate from that idea that we don't think about it in that way. But your kids being a part of this cultivation process, watching the plant grow, seeing it flower, recognizing it as a flower that then you can use medicinally, recreationally, whatever, I feel like in and of itself is like, there's not much stigma to have.
Yeah. And I think there is something beautiful about seeing that whole process. Even if you see the process of alcohol being made, there's still like this contraption that gets in there, right? There's barley, there's rice, there's whatever, thing you want to use, potatoes, whatever. But it goes through this like radiator type coil, then it drips into beakers and all this shit. So it's like, you can tell this is heavily processed. Yeah. Whereas to your point, here's a seed, right? Watching that seed grow. Hey, look, there's a leaf. Oh, look, there you go. And you're seeing the process of nature birthing itself.
Yeah.
And then nature helping the human, which is what we are, right? We're part of nature. Nature's part of us. So we utilize the products from nature to help us. And so I think that's a beautiful way, because for me, I've been trying to find a way to talk to my kids about it for a while. And I don't think I've said this on yet, but my kids are 19 and 14. So they know, right?
Yeah.
About a year or so ago, my youngest and I were walking through Seattle to go to a movie, and we parked in a parking garage, came up to the street level, and came out to the street, and there must have been somebody smoking a joint right in front of us or something.
It's probably me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is Kate, And my daughter, she looks at me, she's like, "Dad, it smells like incense out here." And I looked at her and I'm like, "Girl, somebody's been lying to you."
Right?
Hopefully it wasn't me.
Hilarious.
But it's I've had all these opportunities to talk to my kids about it, but I'm not comfortable with it.
It's hard.
It is really hard.
I've frozen so many times, but one time someone told me, answer the question that they're asking. Don't answer the question that you think they're asking. So when they're like, "What's cannabis?" I'm like, "A plant." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Mm-hmm. And then when they have a bigger brain space to understand the plant better, then you can talk about it in a different way. So you're kind of matching like where they're at versus trying to be like, cannabis is a plant and it's kind of like alcohol, but it's a little bit different, but I know you're more familiar with alcohol. So it's like, our brains are trying to spin on trying to create a way to talk about it that's understandable for them, but they might not even want that information.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're not operating in that capacity where
No.
they even care about all the things that we're projecting onto them from our dare years and whatever,
Right.
you know, where we're like, ooh, this is a thing. To them, it's not a thing because
Right.
they're just learning about it as they go. And so they're like, oh, this is a plant in my
Yeah.
garden of many plants with flowers and leaves and whatever.
I love that. Answer the question they're asking, because
Yeah.
I get so in my head about like
Because you don't want to lead them astray. You don't want to
Totally.
lie to them and then have
Yeah.
it be a thing, you know, down the road or a mistrust thing. But it's been really helpful to have those difficult conversations on a really just smaller scale level, because if they have more questions, I mean, oh my God, you guys, how many questions do your kids ask on a daily basis? Maybe it's just mine, but it's quite a few. So
Yeah.
they don't have a propensity to not ask questions, right? So if you've answered it and they don't ask again, like, wash your hands for that day. Like, you nailed it, because there's going to be harder questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Get ready for them.
I know, and it's going to be a journey. I feel very, I don't know, nervous, because I think that the way that I used cannabis when I started using it was not at all beneficial to me,
Yeah.
and like took me out of myself. I was definitely, I mean, heavily coping, right? I was like navigating ADHD diagnoses and like mental health things, and also just being like an angsty, outspoken woman, which had a lot of baggage when we were coming up, you know? And so it was, I think I don't want to say like it held me back, but it definitely impacted the experiences I was having, the upbringing I was having. And I hope that my son can have more balance in it if he chooses to use it. But I'm like, how could I have ever gotten through to high school Natalie? Like, there wasn't a way, you know, nobody could have told me to be different. And I was just chain smoking blunts like a champ. I mean, and I turned out fine, right? I'd like to think.
Totally, yeah.
You know, and I do think, so like there's this one story that I think about all the time that gives me evidence that it was a good thing. And I was in college, I was at the University of Denver. I was all dressed up going to Rush to be in a sorority, which everyone that I told I was doing this was like, are you fucking kidding me? Post, you're going to be in a sorority? Like, LOL. No, but I was like, well, this is what all these girls are doing that I'm like friends with in the dorm, so I'm going to do this. As we were walking to Rush, I ran into two of my friends, this is lacrosse players, and they were like, Post, we're going to smoke a blunt, and that's you. Like, this isn't you, that's you. Like, you need to come with us. And my gut was just like, yeah, I do. I need to go with them. And I went, and I swear, like, that decision, that moment, then took me in this different trajectory where I, like, didn't go with all these women to this Rush, to this community of women. I instead, like, followed my plant medicine path. I ended up leaving University of Denver, went to Zimbabwe to photograph live. Like, basically, it, like, took me on my art journey.
Yeah.
Which then landed me at Colorado State doing an art major the following year after these travels. And that's how I met my mentor, who has now, like, given me my business and my artist life that is so profitable and fabulous and successful and all of these things that, like, I really can kind of trace back to this one choice.
Wow.
Where I chose to go get high instead of Rush, which I think many people would have thought was an irresponsible decision, but you know, it was my journey, and now I am like able to talk about it in an authentic way that doesn't have shame.
Right.
Whereas for a long time I was like embarrassed, like, oh, what did I turn down because of that choice?
Right.
When I'm like, I mean, what did I gain? Nailed it.
Well, and then just to kind of go back to the stigmas ideas, like how many times has somebody invited somebody out for a celebratory drink?
Right.
Hey, come get a scotch with me. Come have a beer. Come do a thing, right? And nobody thinks twice about that. But to your point, like, hey, I'm going to go smoke a joint. It's like, whoa, is that the right thing to do?
Yeah.
We didn't even think twice about that. If somebody's like, hey, let's go grab beer at the bar. Yeah, fuck, why not? You know?
Totally.
It's those stigmas that, like, not only are we accepting from society, but now we're putting on ourselves. Like, we created a story in ourselves of like, oh, I'm not doing the right thing. I remember the commercials you just talked about. Like, this is your brain, cracked egg. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? It's like, when you're a fucking toddler and you see shit like that,
Yeah.
followed by like stranger danger shit, it's like, oh, I don't know how to trust anybody. I don't know how to do anything. It's like, there's
Yeah.
all these things that kind of get planted into our heads and into our ideas of the world that maybe we have parents that can help us understand that as we get older. Maybe we get older and we reparent ourselves to the understanding of like,
The latter.
Yeah.
most of our danger comes from internal family members, not external family members, right? So it's like, where are we really kind of pushing the understanding for these kids?
You know what's funny too is if you really think back to that egg commercial, like an egg uncracked isn't worth anything. Like, you have to crack it in order to get the benefits.
Totally, right?
So like, and that just came to me now.
Powerful
so
metaphor.
like, you
I
know,
like
I'm
it.
like,
I
wait a
love that.
second, what was the bad thing? Because we have to, and again, I cracked 8 eggs this morning to go ahead and make breakfast for my kids.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Like, that's... I've got some questions. I need to go.
Drugs help us make food, is what you're saying.
Make food better.
All right.
Oh my God, yeah.
You're just gonna shove an egg in your mouth, you know? Fucking hell.
Good luck.
Well, let's talk about the different types of plant medicines. And well, you know, there's obviously hundreds and hundreds of types of plant medicines. You can look at herbs for supplements, like holy basil, stuff like that. But we're talking about a little more intoxicants.
Yeah.
We have cannabis, which we've talked openly about. We have microdosing, which y'all did a beautiful episode, and I love the follow-up episode.
We feel like we had to.
Yeah.
It was good. It
We're
wasn't
like,
expected.
hey, we're humbled.
Yeah.
As soon as it came out, I listened to it. I'm like, oh, that layers so well on the explanation of the journey through.
Hilarious.
So we have microdosing cannabis. We have macrodosing, right?
Yeah.
Which obviously we don't want to try to do around our kids.
Yeah.
And then there's some of the plants that I like to use, like hape, which if you're not familiar with, I can explain that. And then one of the energetic medicines is not a plant medicine. It's more of a frog medicine, non-hallucinogenic.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not bufo. It's not 5-MeO-DMT, but it's combo.
Okay.
And combo is like a purging medicine. So again, that's not one I would do around my kids, but that's one that I know that I have friends that are parents that take their kids to combo sessions and have them purge and have them throw up. And they're 13 or older, so they're old enough to make some decisions and understand what they're doing. It's not like a toddler going in there and yakking his brains out. But there's so much support that these medicines can offer us if we can find the communities that will embrace it, and also the idea that we can just kind of squash that stigma, external and internal, and allow these medicines to help support us in some kind of way.
Totally.
So for, we obviously talked about cannabis, and for those that didn't listen to your microdosing episode, just what's your kind of take on microdosing, either with your kids around you or with the idea of helping to open you up to parent differently?
Well, I am a big proponent of psychedelics. I feel like they have been monumentally transformative for me in many chapters of my, 20s into even now. Obviously, I do them less often because, as you mentioned, it's not really a thing you can do effectively while parenting.
Right.
Microdosing psilocybin in particular, I have done that around Leon, but I have a partner who's not really into substances in general. His drug of choice is intense exercise, physical exertion is his thing. And so there's just a lack of understanding where if I am using plant medicines in that way, he is, he's just he doesn't get it, right? Yeah. So then it doesn't create, it doesn't foster an environment for me where I feel like then I am my best self and using it in the best way because I'm constantly trying to monitor how he's feeling about my choices, right? So, but I do think that it is so imperative that if you're a person who is looking to expand your consciousness, that you consider psychedelics as an option because they allow your brain to experience new neural pathways, as you brought up before. It's like a refreshing, brain dump where then you get to start anew or make connections that you didn't once see. And I feel like that can be profound for people. And for me, it has led me to many life choices that were, now I look back as incredible that I needed to make, but I may not have ever made had I not allow psychedelics to show me that road. So, but Kait, you use functional mushrooms quite a bit.
Yeah,
What's your experience with that?
My history with mushrooms is I did them in high school first, and I had my big profound thing there was because high school is dramatic, right?
Yeah.
It's dramatic to be in, it's dramatic to experience. Everything about it is dramatic. And I had a thought in a park with a bunch of my like-minded friends, and I was like, none of this matters. And it just felt like it was kind of a big release from the universe.
Yeah.
A lot of the pressure. And don't get the pressure happily built back up.
Yeah, right.
To at least have that moment to come back to that it doesn't matter. Even it just kind of was a grounding opportunity that I was able to kind of carry through my whole life. And then I had kids. I had kids super early and on accident. At 24, I found out I was pregnant.
Me too. All right.
Changing to say the least. And so I didn't do anything psychedelic for a really long time because I really wasn't in a place where the guilt of altering my mind was something that I would have been able to cope with. I think I would have spun off and had a bad trip.
Right.
And to avoid that, I decided to not do it until I would say like probably the last couple of years is where I've dipped my toes back into it.
Yeah.
And doing little short microdose sessions, like the one we did in our recording. And then through one of my contract work, I found a really awesome lady out of Southern California who makes a functional mushroom blend. And so I do 4 days on, 3 days off, or 5 days on, 2 days off. And usually I'll coincide it with during the week. And what's really cool is I get a lot of the benefits from like a stress and anxiety perspective. And I feel like a blanket is lifted off of me, like the blanket of life, so to speak, right? Like all of the things that could doom spiral, all of the things that could go wrong. And I notice it when I don't, like, cause I'm, again, ADHD, routines are very good for me, but I resist them like the plague. Yeah. So, you know, having the consistency of that, and when I don't take it, and I'll just be like, God, why am I just kind of like, today?
Claw hands tight.
Claw hands.
Right,
my body is tense, and I take it, and I forget about it, and then like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh my God, it's just not that bad.
Yeah.
And that has been awesome in terms of managing anxiety and understanding where anxiety comes from. And so I do that. I probably, now that I'm like actually thinking about it, because I've swapped my coffee for mushroom coffee.
Oh, yeah.
So I have my mushroom pill, I have my mushroom coffee, and then, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, and I also do AG1, which is just like a lot of greens in a supplement, and they have functional mushrooms in there too. So I'm like, the next thing I need to Google is like, how much is too much with functional mushrooms? But again, because it doesn't have a psychedelic component, you know, I don't know if whatever that, towing that line, but I've found just immense relief and just kind of contentment. You know, we were talking on the way here, and she told me that I have a grounding personality, and I'm like, well, that must be because you just met me, because like no one in my life would ever express me as a grounding. Like,
well,
I'm a top spinning off of some planet. Like,
but you're a Virgo. This came up because we were talking about her birthday is the day after my partner's, and they're both Virgos. And I have like quite a few best friends who are Virgos. My partner, obviously, some other close friends of mine. And there's, you know, people who are into astrology say like the Gemini Virgo combo is like very common. And it's because as a flighty air sign, we latch on to people who are earth signs, who are more grounded. And I feel like we have such similar personalities, like literal brain twins, finish each other's sentences. But for me, you have like a very calming presence that does not seem, I don't know, like buzzy, if you will, whereas I kind of feel like I'm always operating up here, and if you guys could see me, you'd see my hands flitting about above my head. And then I, you know, I'm attracted to people who bring me down or make me feel more centered and
more stable, more grounded.
And that's how I experience you, Kait. So maybe that will help you rewrite the story in your mind about how your energy is perceived by other people.
Yeah. I mean, I did resist being a Virgo for like my entire life, because I'm like, I'm not a dainty little virgin. And I'm like, now I am. Yeah. Awesome. We've come here. I'm like, oh, no, that's not me. And then I'm like, that's just totally me. And I've resisted it.
Yeah.
Well, the blanket that you mentioned, I think, is a really interesting concept, and it's something I talk to my clients a lot about. You know, and it's that familiarity, that pattern that our brain falls into, good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah.
And we could be. Like for myself, like I was so toxic to myself for the longest time, but was okay with it because that was my pattern, right? I went to work, I worked 18 hours a day, I'd get home, I'd drink 2 bottles of wine. That time I didn't smoke any, I wasn't consuming any cannabis, I was just drinking and smoking cigarettes still. Yeah. And it's just it's like this spiral that you don't realize you're spiraling into, because you're cozy with this razor blade laced blanket of like shit and like all this crap that you wrap yourself in. You're like, oh, this is cozy. And like right next to you, there's a marshmallow blanket. Right. That's free of all the debris, all the shit that you've wrapped yourself in. It's the coziest thing in the world, but you're like, nah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay over
We
here.
always choose the devil we know.
Yep. And it was it was for me, because I started smoking cannabis again before I quit drinking. It was 4 or 5 year overlap. But the plant medicines, as far as psilocybin, came back into my life in a macro dosing kind of state. And I was very confused in life, and just kind of like, we just had a death in the not in the family, but a really close friend of ours passed away very all of a sudden. Like one of the most healthy humans I've ever met was jogging and had a heart attack. Oh. And it just sucked, and it really kind of like blew up a lot. Thank you. It really like blew up a lot of our understandings of life and the trajectories of life. And then shortly after that, I kind of see Monica, my fiance, was working on a fishing boat at the time. So she went to go to Alaska for like 4 months. I'm by myself. And so for me, I'm like, I gotta do something different. And I started macrodosing again. And it basically just shook all this shit up in my head. It was like, okay, you've comfortably settled into this life that you now know is not for you. And here is the hero's dose on a regular basis that you're going to need to shake those cobwebs up and to understand what's going on in life. And it was the most beautiful experiences. I probably like 6-8 months. I macrodosed probably about a dozen times and really just shook some shit up. Yeah. It's like 7 to 8 grams each time. And, but then, so got a lot of clarity there, but then through that was like, okay, so where do I go now? Like, how do I continue on? And that's where microdosing really was there to help support. And to what y'all were talking about earlier, it's like you can witness yourself starting to feel anxiety, right? Instead of just all of a sudden you're driving down the freeway, white knuckling your fucking car steering wheel, nobody in the car, no traffic, it's a beautiful day, and you're like, fuck life. But with microdosing, it's like you can start to feel the hands tighten and you can start to feel the breath short, and you're like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm getting anxious. Okay, what's going on? Parents, their family's good, kids are good, I'm good, I got my bills. Okay, let's talk about, let's calm down, let's breathe, right?
It allows you to approach with curiosity instead of judgment, which I think furthers the spiral.
Yes.
And I think Michael Pollan does an incredible job of, I'm sure you're familiar with him, but he wrote the book, How to Change Your Mind. And the way he describes the experience of psychedelics, micro or macro, is a fresh coat of snow. So if you think about your neural pathways as sledding tracks, no matter how much you try to go down a new track, you're going to just go down the tracks that have already been sled before repeatedly. But psychedelics give you a fresh coat of snow, which allows you to go down new tracks and like figure out a new, shake the cobwebs up, as you mentioned, and like figure out a way out. And I think that can be so profound for people. And on like a societal conscious level, I always think back to this Joe Rogan stand-up bit that's like 20 years old now, I swear, but he talks about how like if you were to just dive bomb the Middle East with weed, what a different life it would be, because they'd like, they'd cough for a few weeks, then they'd wake up and be like, what are we doing? Like suicide bombings would be the first to go. He talks about but it's a hysterical bit, and I've always thought about it. And at the time, obviously, I like loved weed, so I was like, yeah, weed for everyone. Yeah. It's gonna save the world. But it like allows you to. I mean, whatever plant medicine you choose, the overarching theme of them all is that it allows you to it reminds you how connected you are to everything around you, and that like you are a cog in a very complex system. You are not like going it alone in this individual experience that is like really hard and a lot of suffering. And so I feel like it could be so profound if, I'm not a doctor. You choose your own plant medicines wisely. I must disclaimer. But
Nat's always worried about the disclaimers.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm like, well, then no. They're conscious people. If people wanted to make those choices, they're still going to have a profound experience.
Yeah, totally. But I think they're not for everybody. Is all I'll say. Because I think some people are not prepared to face their demons, and ultimately, like if you have demons, they're going to come out.
You have to be open to that. You have to be open to the things that are going to come up, and you can't think it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. Because it's not always going to be. But the one thing that, we've talked about, like I haven't microdosed specifically around my children, even really just micro. The tail end of after we recorded that episode, one thing I noticed is I went home, and I'm sure I was still tripping a little bit, but it was negligible at that point. But I was so calm with every problem that my kids brought to me. Whereas before, like you've got work calls, you've got agenda, you have things that you have to accomplish, be it if you're a stay-at-home mom, house cleanings, or getting the kids places, whatever it is, whatever your walk of life may be. What I was so interested with is that I was able to approach their problems with such a calm and collaborative mind that I think how we run around in our current society when we aren't tripping on mushrooms it doesn't necessarily foster that calm response all the time.
Totally.
Yeah. There was I remember having a spirited discussion with my daughter. I think she's probably 15, 16 at the time, so that age
Many
where,
spirited
we're just
conversations.
getting through life. And, and I wasn't microdosing at the time or like currently at that moment, but I had been microdosing in life at that point. And I remember she did something. By no means did she need to be berated the way I was, but that's the way I was raised, and this takes some time to understand, like, we don't want to raise our kids that way. But I remember yelling at this child, and her head was down. She's kind of shoulders away from me. Yeah. And I remember I tried to catch myself as I was saying it, but it came out, and I said in a very strong voice, "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Right, which I'm sure a lot of our parents have said to us.
Totally.
And as soon as I said it, I was like, holy shit. Like, that is the worst thing I could have ever said to her right now. Her shoulders are sunken in. She's crying. She's turned away from me. And I'm forcing this small human to look me in the eyes while I berate her over some shit that doesn't even fucking matter.
Yeah.
And it was like that moment of like, shit, okay, fuck this. Give me a hug. Let's just throw this all away. Let's start over.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Because we can build into an understanding of what we're trying to work through and take the emotion out of it.
Totally.
But and this is just me assuming, if I had just been continuing drinking and continuing with that life, I would have never found that out about myself. And that girl would have been under my thumb this entire time.
Yeah.
And that's no way for her to be raised and her to raise herself as a strong, amazingly brilliant human being in this world, to feel that she needs to downplay her emotions to be able to appease a bigger human.
Right.
Which is a big thing with females. Let me go ahead and
100%.
just tell you. That was my whole
No.
childhood. You know what I mean? That was my childhood.
I know.
You calm down.
Right.
And that's why, like, whenever a male tells me to calm down, I get instantly irate. So like PSA for like any male, like telling someone to, and just in general, telling someone to calm down very, very rarely makes them calm down.
Right.
Totally.
And so, but then I guess, other side of that is you have to relearn how to have your emotions. And I think that's a good thing with psychedelics because it's an emotional experience to begin with. Yeah. So understanding that having those emotions, working through them, letting them pass, creates those new sled paths to be like, okay, I can have emotions that doesn't make me weak. And that's a big thing that we do with our kids too, is like, I've totally caught myself in similar situations where I'm like, oh my God, I don't even care about this. Or like, like my son will go to sleepovers and he'll stay up till 4 a.m. And my only rule is you just can't be a dick the next day. You made these decisions. If you want to take a nap, go take a nap, but you can't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Yep. Love that.
Well, and I think, as a dating and relationship coach where I do all of this studying of attachment and attraction, like also what happens in those moments is you're modeling to your daughter how a man who loves you should treat you.
Yes. Oh, completely.
And that is like where it is so much more impactful than just that like interaction of dad to daughter.
Right.
It then sets the tone for like, this is what I'm looking for in a partner, whether she's cognizant of it or not. We learn our attraction from the whatever the sex you're attracted to, or both perhaps. But like that relationship with your origin family, whoever raises you, doesn't have to be your dad, but like that is what you learn.
Right.
And there's so many things that I now see in my partnership of 5+ years where I didn't know this stuff that I now know in my work that I'm learning now. And I'm like, oh yeah, there is like so much of my parents' energy in our dynamic that I just wasn't aware of until now. And now I see it so clearly. I'm like, oh, when you talk to me like that, that's like ding, 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 that's my father, and that's what we end up seeking out. And obviously, like, luckily we are very in love and are working through these things, but it just becomes so much more clear to me that this is these interactions that I had with my parents that now have fostered what I have in my partnership. And it's so, so imperative that we become aware of those things so that we can give our kids a new chance at, recognizing that and finding the best people for them.
Yeah, and breaking the habits, right? We need to break those habits. The hape I've mentioned a couple times.
Oh yeah, I want to talk about that because I wasn't familiar with it.
We Googled it on the way here.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Wanted
She's
to
like,
learn
do you
more
know
about
that word he said? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I was like, oh,
cocaine?
hape.
Like, which I guess cocaine's also a plant, but
Processed, yeah.
Yeah.
So hape is a tobacco-based nasal snuff, right? And so the main component that's consistent throughout it is mapacho tobacco. And so mapacho tobacco is like a really high-grade tobacco that's grown naturally in the Amazon. There's no chemicals and none of that shit. So there's none of the carcinogens, the cravings, all that crap. There's still nicotine in general. It just has some addictive qualities. So it's, still we have to watch out for that. But so it's mapacho tobacco ground up into a powder mixed with plant ashes. So you take like plants, burn them down, take those ashes, mix them together. And so the application is you take a little bit and you basically blow it up each nostril. And you sit there for maybe like 5 minutes or so. Everybody's different. Some people purge, so they'll cry, they'll throw up. For me, there's definitely tears. There's more of like a dopamine rush, but there's also like that awareness understanding. So for me, one of the main reasons that I love this medicine is, let's take the example of like argument with the spouse or kid, something like that, right? Like just maybe we show up the way we don't want to, no matter how much work we do, there's still that person in there, right?
We're human.
Yeah, we're human, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna get upset, I'm gonna scream sometimes, but I want to be able to like backtrack and be like, shit, man, that's not who I want to be. So hape is one of those medicines for me that'll instantly ground me. It takes me right here into this moment. It takes all the bullshit away. It's like a big windshield wiper. It's just like, hey, bullshit story, you're gone. You're seeing clear now. And it gives you that ability to kind of reassess what I just went through, how I just showed up, and be like, okay, I'm ready to go apologize. I'm ready to go like show up and say, hey, look, fucking sorry. That was not me. No excuse, but I don't want to be that human. So I'll utilize it for that, but also just, before this session, I sat down with hape. It's grounding, right? It takes you out of those stories. It puts you into your humanness. And it's one of those medicines that as soon as I found it, it was like, oh, cool. Okay. You're my teacher. We're going to learn together.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never tried it. But I'm always a don't knock it till you tried it type gal. So, we'll have to.
It is definitely an experience. And it leaves like tobacco in your nose. I mean, it looks like you just walk through a dust storm after you're done. You like blow your nose. It's like, oh, what the hell is all that shit? But, one of the things too with this and with psilocybin, not necessarily with cannabis, but we have an inability as a human race to really sit with sensations. Like we really want to get done
on to the next one.
Yeah, even Brene Brown just had this really good talk I just listened to about joy. How we can't even sit with joy because we're waiting for the shoe to drop.
Totally.
Right? So we're just like, oh, joy, that's great, but what else, right? And so with things like macrodosing mushrooms or with hape, you've intentionally given yourself this sensation that you can never walk away from now, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it'll go away eventually, but how do you sit with that? How do you sit with that sensation you created for yourself and embrace it, knowing that you're going to learn something from it and it's going to stop. You're going to go back to your normalcy, but where does that happen, right? How can you embrace that? How can you sit through that? And then how can you learn from that?
How long does it last?
About 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in and out. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's a great one. But there's so many different types of those medicines out there. Combo I mentioned earlier, that's a frog venom that you basically...
We're not licking toads.
Not licking toads, right? This one is a purging medicine, right? So you drink a bunch of water, they put the venom on your skin, and then you throw up for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And, for me, after I quit drinking alcohol, that was one of the best things for me because I drank for so long and so hard that there was colors coming out of my body that the body doesn't create, like neon purples and like thick black shit. And I'm like, what the hell? And but my, the practitioner is like, this is a cellular release. Like you're releasing stuff from your cells. So it's not only your shit, but this is also your ancestral stuff that you're releasing.
Interesting.
And like I said, I have friends that have their kids go through this, and those are like not an everyday thing, maybe once a year, something like that.
Yeah.
But, we just get shit built up that we need to purge. We need to get out of our system. And I think the more we start to make this a more regular thing and more accepted, then some of these medicines can be more utilized for our adolescents without us being like, oh my God, you're getting your kid high. okay, no,
Or like,
CBD,
here's this antidepressant.
Yeah.
Or like, here's
Right.
ADHD medication.
Totally.
Oh
That's
my
going to
God.
stack all these side effects on top of you.
I was
going to
say,
shit.
can it purge microplastics? Because we
That'd
all
be
need
great.
it otherwise.
Yeah.
But I'm actually glad you explained it in that way, because for me personally, like even with ayahuasca, like these purging category, if you will, I've never wanted to go down. Like it's just never sounded appealing to me,
Yeah.
because I'm like, I don't know if I want to go like shit my brains out in a bucket while I have a deep existential experience. I'd much rather eat acid and go dance to some music and then
Right.
have my existential late night or whatever, you know? But thinking about it in that way of like cleansing not only your experiences, but perhaps generational things, whatever you're carrying, I feel like that can be very transformative for people. And I love to proceed with an open mind about all things that alter consciousness. So
Yeah, most definitely.
here for it.
Most definitely.
Whatever people need, you know, it's like I'm in such support of whatever you feel like you need. Go seek it out. There's a reason you're thinking of it. There's a reason that your inner knowing is like bringing it to you and offering it to you. Chase your whims, you know? I am like such a proponent in that. Like go where the fear is was one of the best advice anyone ever gave me. And now that is not to say like when you have literal fear to like go anyways, but when you feel like a curiosity, but it kind of scares you, go. And just see what's on the other side of that. And it's never led me astray to this day. So
Well, because like anxiety is like negative excitement, right?
yeah.
100%. Exactly. You know, it's just how the body perceives it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and excitement show up the same way. It's just how the brain says, I'm
This
anxious
is good.
or I'm
This
excited.
is bad.
Totally. Now, I know you guys are on time limit, and I want to respect your time. I feel this is going to be the first of a few episodes that we'll
Yeah,
probably do together
that'd be
because we're
fun.
just like scratching the surface here.
I know. I'd love to chat more.
But just, you know, I know we've kind of tap danced around a lot of subjects. I think we opened the conversation or continued the conversation that your podcast holds very, very strongly. And I think just wrapping it up, having your understanding of what can work for you, not necessarily what's worked for the masses, right? Try this stuff out.
Yes, exactly.
See what happens, right? You know, we have safe spaces now. We have safe people. You can find people through this podcast, through y'all's podcast, that can help support you in these ways. But I think a lot of it, and kind of what we tap dance around, is the stigmas around it, whether it's external or internal. Like
Yeah.
find your way through an understanding of what works for you might not work for everybody else. You know, the idea that we're all on a spectrum, not just what we call like neurodivergent humans. We're all humans on a spectrum. Like nobody is the same. No medicines will work the same. No side effects will be the same. So take a chance. Try something that's different. Like this lather, rinse, repeat of crazy alcohol and just negative consumption. Yeah. There's got to be a better way. And if this might be your way, try it out. If it doesn't, at least you tried.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, like two things on that. How many times have you thrown up from alcohol?
Oh my God.
Like so many. And
So
then people
many.
are like, I had one bad time with cannabis. I'm like, only one?
You're like, oh my God.
You know, like, and just that always has blown my mind. But then just finding out what works for you, experimenting with it. And also the thing that's been really grounding for me when I've been working over the last, because I literally started the podcast because I was like, I'm going to fake it till I make it. I'm going to fake my comfortability with my stoner status until it becomes my reality.
Yeah.
And through doing that, I've learned that honestly, comparing it to, again, things that we're comfortable with, right? If I reach for cannabis, but someone else reaches for Tylenol, like they're both drugs.
Yeah,
Right.
except
Like-
Tylenol kills 100+ people a year.
Right.
Right.
100%.
Cannabis kills
So
none.
I try to reconcile it in that way. If people are open to using antidepressants, then I can be open to using mushrooms
Psilocybin.
Totally.
to be able to go ahead and have that experience or to work through those things. Just because it isn't something that has been established by this, government created federation to go ahead and say yes, no, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just doesn't mean that it's not for everyone.
Well, and now that there is some research being done, they know it. Like, and I don't remember the stats, but a good friend of mine works in the psychedelic assisted research program in Naropa, which is in Colorado. And they did the MAPS conference in Denver, and one of the presentations was about the effectiveness of anti-anxiety, antidepressants. And they were like a 3 or a 4 out of 10 in the best performing trials. And psilocybin was like a 9 or 10
Right.
in every one. It's like these actually are helping, if not curing, these much more severe symptoms of depression, anxiety, PTSD. and more effectively than all these things that we deem safe, normal, prescribed to our children, whatever. It's like
without the side effects.
Without the side
without
effects.
the side effects.
Yep. And a deeper understanding of self and everything around us.
Which is sort of priceless.
It's fucking priceless. Goddamn.
Snaps,
Well,
baby.
Thank you both. I'm so
Thank
excited
you for having us.
to have y'all back again for this conversation and just to have face to face. Thank you so much for what y'all do and for like deleting a lot of these stigmas and educating the world. Appreciate y'all.
We're working on
Likewise.
it. Ditto.
All right, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you so much for sharing time with Natalie, Kait, and I. If you'd like to support the Pot Moms or listen to more of their content, please check out the show notes. Also, ways to support the show. Obeisance and love. We'll see y'all next time.